pieces of junk and have to spend tens or $100,000 to fix it.
Yeah.
I told her if we have to, go home shopping, she's gonna go ahead with the agent and I'm gonna lag behind and I'm gonna pull back pieces of vinyl siding so I can peek behind there to see what's going on. Welcome to the Fine Home Building Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Matt Milham, Deputy Editor.
How's it going?
Brian Pontalillo, Fine Home Building Editor.
Hey, everyone.
And Jeff Rose, all our editor.
Hey, guys.
You can email your questions to FHB Podcast at taunton.com. You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Well, it is a pleasure to see you guys this morning, and we were talking about it before the show. If we have any success today, we will have snatched victory from the jaws of defeat. Oh, here we're already going sideways.
Okay.
We lost Brian. Matt learned about being on the show, I don't know, was it 5 minutes ago, Matt?
It was about 5 minutes ago, yeah.
Yeah.
I ran and got coffee. I was like, oh no, I can't make it through.
I put the wrong date on the meeting invitation that we used to, alert each other to be here. And it was a train wreck so far, but we're going to make this work somehow. So I guess we'll wait for Brian to come back, or should we start talking without him?
We can do whatever you want to do.
What do you think, Jeff?
I kind of feel like we should wait till he comes back and do a fresh start. But
Okay.
Oh, we can't do a fresh start. We can't start over now. We're already into it. But we'll take a break and we'll come back, right?
okay.
Yeah.
Hey, buddy.
And he's
All right,
back.
you're back on.
It's so funny how, something happens on my end, but it seems like it happens to you all.
Right.
You guys all three.
Like you can
And that time
your
it throws up hard. Like it was just solid as a rock. So I just figured I'm getting out of here. We have to start again. Hopefully, this is not an ongoing problem.
Well, it only fits with the way the things have been going this morning so far. So.
Yeah.
So, Matt, how are your pups? You were talking about them a little in a company conversation on Slack, and we shouldn't talk too much about that, but they're acting like puppies, right?
Yeah, they're acting like puppies. I mean, dogs are, they're kind of gross. They do all kinds of silly stuff. And I had moved their pen. It was a little bit small. I had put it in a spot where it would kind of fit and kind of be in a place where I could watch them all day if I put them outside. And it's too cold to leave them out for very long now anyway. But
Sure.
So anyway, I moved it to a different spot, and we have all kinds of wildlife outside, bears, deer, foxes, everything. And anyway, so the bears love to go to the bathroom all over the place. They don't, contrary to popular belief, they do not just poop in the woods. They also poop on your driveway or in your lawn. And anyway, so it's really cold out, and the area I put the pen is got a lot of really high grass. It's kind of a place we sort of are letting go back a little bit wild, but it seemed like it'd be a fun place for the dogs to run around. And one of them, I went out in the dark to get him the other night and brought him back in, and one of them runs underneath the coffee table and drops something on the floor. I'm like, oh no, what is that? Big clump of bear poo. But yeah, so she had a little bit of stomach troubles after that because I think she'd been snacking on it. But
Oh my God.
Lovely.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll learn her or not, but hopefully.
Well, some of us have to learn the hard way, Matt. That's all I would say.
Yeah.
Brian, what have you been doing?
Not much. Making a magazine with you all and living a pretty quiet existence otherwise.
So what does one do to amuse oneself when one is a renter during times of COVID?
That's a good question. Well, we talked about my new motorcycle.
Have you been riding it? Is it comfortable?
Episodes back. Yeah, so I've been riding it. We've had warm enough weather to ride for sure. And I think I might make a couple of desks this weekend.
What?
Yeah.
This weekend? Man.
What?
This coming weekend. I need to do something, and Amy needs a desk, and she had an idea for a desk that that I think I might be interested in too. So I'm going to kind of make some prototypes, like just really kind of simple materials, just kind of screw them together and see if we like them. Yeah, probably plywood. Not sure what I'm going to do yet for the legs, but yeah, just some simple like prototype desks to see. I bought, when I moved down here 2.5 years ago, I needed to work. I had some I wasn't working at Fine Homebuilding at the time, and I had some freelance assignments, and I needed to I got here and I needed to work, and I didn't have a desk. So I went out, I went on Craigslist. I drove out to a neighborhood like 20 minutes outside of the city. I bought a desk for $20, and the gentleman who sold it to me threw in a chair. And none of this is very stable or very useful, and I'm still using it today, almost 2 years later.
Well, I'm going to tell you something. I have the perfect suggestion for you. So I have these rigid sawhorses from the test, right?
Oh, yeah.
I still love these things. They're fantastic. They're height adjustable. The shelf underneath is quite useful. And all you got to do is go to the home center, buy a butcher block top. They're 2 foot wide. You can buy them in 4, 6, and 8 foot lengths, and you stick it right on the sawhorse, and you're done.
It's a good idea.
When you want to work at it at height, you can raise them up. When you want to sit at it, you could lower it. It's freaking awesome.
Yeah, I don't have any sawhorses right now, so
$100 it'll cost you for the sawhorses.
Not a bad idea, Patrick.
And they'll have utility for other stuff.
Well, to change the subject a little bit, it was really exciting how much feedback we got on the article you did on these sawhorses, and
I could have never imagined.
It's been so much fun to read all these letters and look at all the photos, and we're going to pack as many of them as we can. We put one in the last issue of Fine Homebuilding, but they just kind of kept coming. So we're going to pack as many of them as we can into the letters column in this next issue. So if you've written and shown us your sawhorses or shared your experience with sawhorses, we're going to do our best to get in. We definitely have more than we can fit and print. So, but we're going to do our best to get a bunch of them in there, and maybe edit them down a little bit to kind of fit, because I'd rather fit more than
fewer.
Than fewer.
We have a great community, and thank you all for sending that stuff in. It really is special how you share with us, and then we can share with a broader audience, and it's a very cool thing, I would say.
Yeah, and I've been thinking about what's the next thing we got to ask for.
I have no idea.
What else are our readers so passionate about?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Is it
what are you guys passionate
jigs
about?
or wall assemblies, or because we know what our readers are interested in for sure, but this was just sort of an overwhelming response to something, and maybe it's because I think we talked about this a little bit, but maybe I don't know if it was on the show or not, but maybe it's because it's a tool you make yourself, or you can make yourself, and that was what we received, and really some neat stuff. We had a metal fabricator send in his version of sawhorses. We had someone who did a super upgrade on some Harbor Freight sawhorses, out of this world upgrade.
I did not see that. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
And I think that's the other cool thing is sawhorses are super customizable for whatever it is you're doing. And if you do something very specific, you can make something that is perfect for your needs, right?
Yeah, we got a letter from a gentleman who had just suffered a back injury and was starting a project. And so he made a pair that were at a height that he didn't need to bend forward at all to work at them.
That was Eric Blimke, and we have a Pro Talk podcast recorded with him.
Oh, cool.
This was another thread that ties this all together. He is a woodworking teacher in a school district in Ontario, and he was on. That was super interesting to talk to him. He started asking me questions, which was a little uncomfortable, I must admit. Oh boy. So at the risk of hogging the entire show, I've been working on my kitchen cabinets that go around my washer and dryer, and that's how I know about the butcher block countertops you can buy at the home center, because I bought 2 pieces that are 6 foot long, and I ripped one down to make a top wide enough that'll cover the washer and dryer, and I cut a couple cabinet sides, and that might not seem like all that much productivity, but in one plane, the floor is out of level about 3/4 of an inch in about 40 inches. And in about 5 feet in the other plane, it's out about an inch. So I had to make the panels slope on the bottom to make the top flat. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Fun.
It's made a lot easier.
How old is your house?
So my house was originally built in the 30s, Brian, as a probably, occasional use, like kind of campy kind of place, right? It was very tiny. It had a big porch, and there's a lake nearby that folks would have probably boated on, right? So, but when we bought it, it had been recently rehabbed, and that was in 2010.
So is there is it kind of a common setup where there's a center beam down the length of the basement and floor joists that run from the foundation walls towards the center beam?
In the main part of the house, Brian, the big porch I was just describing is now the kitchen. So that became living space. Probably before the guy I bought it from rehabbed it, but it's severely underframed. It is got overspanned joists because it was never meant to be, heavy duty living space, right? It was
right.
This thing was built cheap.
Yeah.
So what I to at least stabilize it so the washing machine wouldn't it was scary how much the floor vibrated when it would go into a spin cycle with a load of towels in there. I said to Carol and Liam one night at the dinner table, I was like, I never really lived or, rented a place where I thought you could fall through the floor, but this might be the place that could happen.
Yeah.
So
Have you done anything to stiffen that up?
Yeah, I went and solved it with my credit card. I went and bought a adjustable lolly column, right? And it was a pretty good one, so it cost like $70. But I just stuck that under the washing machine, and it solved the problem perfectly. So we got some great feedback, as we always do. Like I was saying earlier, we have a really wonderful community that shares stuff with us. This comes from Hyrum. Patrick, we came across this home being built in southern Utah, and we're quite intrigued. It apparently is built out of foam blocks and then stuccoed both inside and out. They claim the proprietary stucco has the strength needed for the headers, beams, etc. This home is being put together by the homeowners, an older couple. I did not talk to them, but a friend did who took these photos. Both the plumber and electrician that I use on my houses are doing the work on this home also. With lumber costs going through the roof, is this the future of housing? The window and door bucks and trim are made of vinyl, so there is literally no wood involved at all. This essentially eliminates the worry of rotting. I'm not sure what they're doing for holding up the cabinets, etc. on the interior. I guess there's more to learn about this new way of building. Thank you, Hyrum, Catalyst Contracting. Have you guys ever seen a system like this?
Looking at the picture, I've seen something like it, and I think it's been around for quite a while. I don't know that, this particular company's version of it has been around for a long time, but...
Do you want to describe it, Matt?
Yeah, it's basically it looks like gigantic blocks of what I'm guessing is probably like super dense EPS foam. I don't know how they're held together exactly, but yeah, it looks like they essentially glue these
they look like Legos,
together,
right?
And create this house. But where is this? This is in southern Utah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if they have issues or worries about rot down there. Maybe they do from vapor drive, but
I think it's the desert.
It looks like the desert, and that's my remembering of this. And I don't remember where I saw it. It may have been when I was a kid or something like that. Like some demonstration of building one of these and then driving like a truck on it, like building a floor deck and then driving like a semi or something on it. So I don't know.
Who wouldn't want to do that?
I might
if
be
you could?
misremembering, but that's one of those things that's. It's in the memory bank somewhere, but I don't know why.
Well, so surface bonding cement, which people have used with CMUs, concrete masonry units, is a thing that's been around for at least decades.
Yeah.
But I've never seen anything like this. How about you, Brian?
No, I didn't. I don't necessarily understand it from the description of it, where it doesn't sound like there's any structural material, unless Matt is right, unless it's
they're glued, right?
Yeah, unless it is the foam that is structural. So, but you still, you got a lot to hold up in a house. So, and I'm not sure how even high density foam is with point loads, right? It's good with loads that are spread out, like pouring a slab over it or something like that. But I don't know about it when it comes to point loads.
Yeah, but right. I mean, are there point loads? This stuff is like, they're big.
But something has to, I don't know. I guess we'd have to see the rest of the system.
Yeah. Well, I do wonder, like if the stucco sort of acts the way he describes it. I mean, they're kind of creating like a stressed skin panel with this stuff, and it could be pretty strong, although at the same time, concrete doesn't really have a lot of like tension, strength and tension. So I don't know.
Jeff, what do you think about this?
It reminds me of, have you guys ever seen the foam home up in New Fairfield?
No.
It's like the most bizarre thing. It was basically huge balloons that they spray foamed over and then stuccoed, deflated the balloons and then stuccoed the surfaces.
That sounds horrible.
Yeah. It was like very, very 70s.
There's one of those across from my sister's home in Western Pennsylvania. Yeah. It's similar. That's the way. Yeah, similar thing, I'm sure.
Yeah. I saw a house. It was actually probably just a picture of a house where a guy had, I think, built like a mound of sand and then like poured concrete over that and then like dug out all the sand, and created like a cave.
That sounds just as bad.
Yeah. These
systems, like, I question them because, like, why have we never seen this given what we do, right? This can't be very mainstream, and there's got to be good reason for that. And in a cooling climate, does it make sense to have 12 inches of EPS, from an environmental or energy standpoint?
That's the thing. That's where I think it may not, so it like I said, I think this has been around for a while, and I think that may be part of why it hasn't taken off. Like,
hasn't taken off.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting, and it's something that I actually just assigned an article to someone to write for Fine Homebuilding about why stick framing rules residential construction in the United States. Because I think it's fascinating that there are many other ways to build, many of them with, lots of positive attributes, lots of reasons why you would like it. And yet, and I hope to find out soon what the percentage of homes are that are stick framed on site in the United States is, but we know it's super high.
It's right? The majority anyway, right?
Yeah. So no matter what we can come up with as designers, engineers, builders, including just stick framing off site, it doesn't seem to make inroads in our building industry. And I mean, I can guess at some of the answers why, but I'll be really curious to find out what, to know what a journalist finds out when they really dig into this. And I'm curious to talk to not only custom builders who we can kind of consider our audience, and remodelers, but also like, kind of big time production builders, and find out, for them, why a builder like Pulte Homes doesn't build a factory where they can control everything, where they can keep on schedule, like, why they continue to build on site.
Because it's cheaper.
Stick frame on site. And that's probably going to be the answer.
Yeah. Because you don't have to maintain a warehouse or a huge building and heat it and cool it and, provide PPE. Like when you're building out in a field somewhere, all that stuff goes away. All those costs are non-existent.
Mm.
That's my theory.
Yeah,
but, I'm so often wrong about this stuff.
I'm sure that's a big part of it. Wonder what the answer will be when it comes to smaller builders, custom builders, especially builders who are building 12-inch thick walls or using Larson truss systems or whatever, like wild things that builders are doing these days. Like, how does it still make sense for them to be executing that on site? Instead of a system that can do all that and be assembled faster, quicker, can be ordered, can be delivered the day you expect it to be there, and the house can be built finished in 3 days, or the shell.
When they figure that out, you'll see it.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah.
Hi, FHB gang. Regarding Kiley's unfinished house photo from episode 305, the picture affects a lot of feelings. On the positive side, it certainly can be described as an interesting house and would probably provide a lifetime of experience framing it and flashing it and every other important detail to keep it from becoming mold candy. I do agree the portico looks cool, but I would wonder if I drove up under it, if a bellhop would come out and open the car door for valet service. I'm trying not to be all sour. So the chimneys are pretty. On a less positive note, the hips on hips on hips are confusing. They're trying to recreate some view of the pyramids of Giza, perhaps. It's certainly clear that the answer to the question, should we add a dormer to the roofline, was a resounding yes. It's hard to tell from a picture, but it also looks like there might be a really nice place on the roof to collect snow and store it for, well, insulation. All joking aside, I just hope when someone finishes it and takes care of it so it's not a waste of material. Keep up the good work. You guys and gal are awesome. Ryan, Redondo Beach, California. Did you see that house, Matt? You weren't on that show.
No, I
missed it. So Kiley sent us a photo of this house she sees when she goes on walks. And how would you describe it, Brian?
Well, I mean, for the most part, I would just describe it as sort of your kind of Mcmansion. You know, it's got the features of a Mcmansion.
Mm-hmm. As several of our listeners pointed out, the thing has been under construction for a really long time because the copper had turned green, which takes at least a decade, right? And the thing is still very much under construction, you can tell. And I wonder if there was some kind of disaster inside, because there's just like this huge debris pile in front of the garage that looks like insulation and drywall and stuff, like a pipe ruptured, or there was a ice dam situation or some other thing that happened.
Mm.
You know, I was in a conversation with Kevin Ireton, former Fine Homebuilding editor, recently about a project that he's considering building. It's on the property of his existing home, and he wants to add a garage with living space above. Whether that living space is a rental, a guest bedroom, or like some live-in help for he and his wife down the road. He's not sure, but he thinks he's always wanted a garage. He's finally at a time when he can do it. And anyway, so he's thinking about making use of it and adding this living space above. And he in one of the problems with the design that we were looking at is that the garage is a little bit out of scale with the house, because his house is this sort of very old Connecticut Cape.
It's tiny.
It's tiny, and even in its tininess, it's got a very, very low profile. The way it sits on his property below these,
and he's got a super sloping lot.
Trees,
so the backside is really short.
Yeah. So this the one of the tricks and concerns is that the garage which is going to have a barn-like kind of appearance, looks really out of scale, and it's got like a salt box kind of shape, and on the north facing side of it is just a big empty roof plane. And so we were kicking around ideas for how to minimize the scale, if it's possible, to minimize the scale of the garage. And I asked them about a dormer. I said, would a dormer, improve the interior space and break up that big roof? And then his response that it might, but it might help the interior space, but the space is already designed pretty well without it. And it does have these south-facing windows, so lots of light coming in. He's going for sort of passive house levels of performance, though he's not trying to build up a passive, certified passive house building. Anyway, you can spend hours talking about whether it makes sense to add a simple dormer or not, because while it will help the design, it adds complexity, it adds cost, it minimizes efficiency. And so, how to answer that question about adding one simple dormer is it's a hard question to answer. And obviously, this came to mind because of the letter that you just read, Patrick. Like, the answer to adding a dormer was a resounding yes. But these are tough decisions to make.
Yeah.
And every time you add complexity to a building, you complicate it.
And increase cost. Kevin has, decided it's a huge energy hit too, right? Instead of having
energy hit.
A huge R60 roof there that's, keeping the heat in. Now, all of a sudden, you got this weird shape that doesn't have nearly as much insulation.
It doesn't have nearly as much insulation. It's got
windows in it.
It's got weak links in the roof. All these different flashing details. And
it takes, let's be honest, tens of hours extra to do that versus just put up roof.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Hello, FHB Podcast team. I couldn't wait to get my FHB T-shirt to pose in front of my recently completed re-siding project. It took 18 months of weekends, evenings to complete all 4 sides on my own, stripping the ugly gray vinyl siding off, getting down to the board sheathing, air sealing and flashing, installing new Pacific Blue Certainteed Cedar Impression siding. The podcast was with me every step of the way, coaching me on air barriers, flashing, Justin's video on workbench window casings, using pocket holes, etc. I particularly enjoyed the discussions on working alone. The suggestion to run the tie-vac vertically down the wall instead of horizontally was a lifesaver when you're working by yourself on a windy day. I was very grateful. It was a very gratifying project to transform one of the ugliest houses on the block. I even built a trellis and sunburst gable. And I actually didn't do it alone. I had you all with me every step of the way. Thank you and keep up the great work. Bob, Beverly, Massachusetts. Bob, that is really sweet. Thank you.
And it looks so much
nice
better.
Work too, Bob.
It looks fantastic. Yeah, Bob, it looks great.
Thank you for getting rid of those useless shutters.
Oh, I've said it before, but our listeners and the folks who subscribe to findhomebuilding.com and to the magazine, they take up some pretty freaking ambitious projects. And it is really impressive, I've got to say. Should we get to a question?
Can I ask one thing on that?
Please.
Have either of you seen where people have used siding on that part of a gambrel roof?
Yes.
On the high pitch? That just seems wacky to me.
Should you do it? No. But yeah, I've seen it before.
Yeah. I mean, I guess technically, as far as the code is concerned, that is considered sort of a wall. Yeah. So you can
Wasn't that the whole origin of the architectural form was to be a tax dodge?
I don't know about that. I mean, I really don't know what the origin of it is. I thought it had more to do with barns maybe, but I really don't know.
I'm making this up, probably.
The tax dodge thing, I think, was the garrison overhang.
What'd you say, Jeff?
Well, mansard roofs were definitely a tax dodge.
Mm. Yeah, isn't that what we're talking about, Matt?
This is a gambrel, but yeah, it's similar in shape, I guess, in some respects, except that it only, affects the, sort of the sides. It's like a modified gable roof.
It seems like putting siding up there is a bad idea.
Yeah.
It should be roof, right?
Yeah.
It's roof. This comes from Pete. Pete writes, all involved in the podcast. It is my favorite. I have listened to each and every one. I am an avid DIYer, volunteer weekly at the local Habitat for Humanity, and enjoy construction. It's not my main job. I'm an engineer and project manager working in the IT field, and I've been hands-on with tools all my life. I follow and appreciate building science and follow and appreciate craftsmanship, but I am practical and middle class. I cannot build new. I repair using craftsmen or afford the best materials. I live in a 1970s ranch in a nice New Jersey suburb. Yes, it has vinyl siding, which I love. When I rebuilt the walls of my half-screen porch this summer, it allowed me to tackle the job knowing I could make it look good. By the way, we used 30-pound felt as my knee wall water protection, T111 on the inside, and a lot of PT, which was, yes, expensive. After completing the job, we had a few sticks to return to the Home Depot, and the return was based on the lowest cost of the several buys I made. I was shocked to see that return ring up, I'm that old, at half the price of my most recent buys from this 3-week project. So isn't that interesting that the price difference between his PT purchases in only a 3-week time was noticeably different?
Yeah. Well, a lot of people are reporting that they just can't get it.
I've heard that.
They just can't get pressure treated lumber right now.
Well, I got a line on some 4-foot offcuts that are stashed under my deck. If anyone wants them, I let them go cheap. Jeff wants and he goes on to say, and yes, I'm a bit long-winded. Now the thought. I often go outside with the jacket unzipped. Why is this so different from my house? I don't desire to live in a spaceship-like closed environment. Me and my family love to open windows, sit outside, etc. I do not use the AC unless it is unbearable. I open a window, turn on a fan, and smell the seasons, listen to the birds and the wind swaying the trees, etc. As you can imagine, I feel very cooped up in the winter. So if I win the lottery and could build a new house with a basement/crawl space, what would be the best envelope design be? Knowing that it will be opened as many times as possible. The science of air sealing cannot be denied. The livability and enjoyment of life is what I question. I would imagine a wall system that can both dry both sides, an open roof system, and a simple but not treated basement like crawl that would house the utilities. Would love to hear your discussion around this. Thanks, Pete. So Pete's saying he likes to open the windows, and he lives in a pretty decent climate, right? Does it make sense to like super air seal his house? And I think it's a really good question. And no one is caring to answer.
Well, I don't think that because you plan to. I mean, this is my opinion here. Obviously, like everything I say on the show, but I don't think because you open the windows means that you don't build the house to what we know to be best practices either. So, just because you're going to open the windows when the weather's nice, you still want a tight house for the winter when you're going to close your windows and heat it. And you want to build a house that is not just for you, but for whoever may own it down the road. Hopefully you're planning on building a house that's going to outlive you. Mm-hmm. And so, I think it's safe to say that, most people in most modern homes spend most of the year in a conditioned environment. That's where, air conditioning is it's standard in every house now. It didn't used to be that way, but it is now, in new builds. And so I don't think, I don't know, if I was building a house, I wouldn't just think about my lifestyle. I think about building the house right, that having the tight house doesn't preclude opening the windows when you want to open the windows. I also wouldn't put your mechanicals in an unconditioned crawl. That doesn't make sense.
Right.
Either condition the crawl and put your mechanicals in it, or put your mechanicals somewhere else.
Yeah, I would would avoid a basement and definitely avoid a crawl space if I could.
So you would, as a matter of course, would build on a slab, Matt, assuming like the lot was, suitable for it, right?
I would, yeah, personally. Yeah. I mean, why? I have a basement and it's, I guess, basically nice storage, but it's not a place I want to hang out. And I know there are plenty of basements that are great and everything, but I don't know, even a walkout basement to me doesn't seem as comfortable as like the rest of the house. So I would just rather have more house.
When I say this to folks, and I agree with you, they say, where are you going to put the ductwork, Patrick? Or where are you going to put the ductwork, Matt?
I mean, I don't have ductwork in my current basement, so
but that's not that's not a reasonable question, because people are building on slabs all over the country and they're finding places to put the ductwork. Unfortunately, they're putting it in unconditioned attics. So we got to change that practice, but it's easy enough to condition an attic. We're seeing more and more builders. Jake Bruton recently did a project with a hybrid slab basement, right? So most of the house
was
a slab,
mean? Okay.
But he had this central basement that ran down the center of the house that just gave him a place to run. It was like a pretty much a subterranean utility chase, It made a lot of sense for him. We've seen Randy Williams using plenum trusses.
That makes
so that
a lot of sense.
He can keep trusses keep mechanicals within the building envelope.
Yep.
So trusses are a great way to go.
You should describe that if you could, Brian, please.
Well, so it's a truss.
Apparel. Yeah,
it's a truss design that, and trusses can be designed in so many ways, and there's such a smart way to build a roof. But this is a plenum truss is a truss design that where the bottom cord bumps up, I don't know, maybe 18 inches, 2 feet at the most, down the center of the truss, so that you can have an air barrier that follows the contours of this truss. So it's flat, and then it bumps up, and then is flat again, and then kind of bumps back down and has this shape, and you can run your air barrier along the bottom of the trusses, and you use that chase to keep your mechanicals, your duct runs and whatnot inside the building envelope.
And then you get a good layer of insulation on top, right?
And you can pile insulation on top of this thing and have pile blown in insulation on top and have a vented roof. And that's a really nice, affordable, smart assembly.
Forgivable assembly, right?
Yeah.
It's going to work.
Yeah. I'm a lot like this listener. I mean, I like to have the windows open as much of the year as it's comfortable to. So I'm down with that. Open your windows and, live it up.
So what's your air tightness goal, Brian?
I think, I don't know the economics of, the difference in efficiency and whatnot of, getting to, 1.5 ACH50 versus 0.5 ACH50, like where in there is the sweet spot? I don't know. But I think around 1 is a pretty nice goal from what I know.
What do you think, Matt?
And from builders that I trust.
What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, it seems like for new builds, hitting 1 doesn't seem to be all that difficult or time consuming. So, I
think there'd be a lot of builders out there who are yelling at their podcast device when they hear you say that, because I think they probably have difficulty getting to 3.
Yeah, and I guess if you're like a production builder and you're just like slamming through houses and you're framing, a house in a day or 2 and running on to the next site or whatever, that maybe that's the case. But I think if you're a custom home builder who's, on a job for a year or more, like, what's a day?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're not. I at the risk of insulting anyone, if someone says it's a challenge to get to, below code minimums for air sealing, I think they're not trying, and they're not learning how to do it, because once you learn how to do it, just to use Jake Bruton as an example again, he says it's a day's work for one person to get to the air tightness levels that he gets to, which are extreme. And because once it's a matter of putting some sealant in the right places while you're framing the walls, it's a matter of taping your sheathing, it's a matter of, taking care with penetrations. But once you know to do these things, and once you're doing them as part of your process, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not rocket science, and it's not time consuming, and it's not expensive.
Right. Yeah. It just becomes part of the process. You become efficient at it. And, then like all of your houses are like Jake's at like 0.3 ACH50.
Right. And it doesn't require expensive products either. And that's something that I think it gets because a lot of the houses that we see that we publish, we're guilty of this, that hit these high benchmarks, use expensive products. You can do it with less expensive products. You don't have to have, European
tapes and stuff,
tape,
right?
Or, you can do it with, I think Travis, right? He likes to talk about this a lot, Travis Berngard, like about how, you can do this work with stuff that you get right off the shelves at your local home center. And you can hit these numbers. So it doesn't have to be expensive either.
I think, I agree with all of that. I think there's people who are builders who are suddenly having to meet air tightness goals and are very surprised when they don't pass the blower door test at the end. And I think that's pretty common. I think it's about learning the process, right? Because it's not something easily done. Unless you want to use aero barrier, it's not something easily done after the build. You can't bolt this on. It's not an addition. It's part of the process, right? Yeah,
right.
But hey, just to bring up that product, that's going to be a solution for. Bless you, Jeff. That's going to be a solution for a lot of people. Do minimal work along the way, and then bring in the air barrier technician, and there's a route you can take.
Yep. I think if every new house built in this country got to 3 air changes, I would be thrilled. I would be staggered. I would never believe it if someone told me that.
It would be a big improvement. And that's only the colder parts of the country where it's 3. In the warmer parts of the country, you only have to hit 5 to meet code.
Every day, guys, in my Facebook feed, I see rotted houses, honestly, just like completely rotted houses from bulk water getting in behind claddings. And it's always these homes built in, from the period of the late 80s to the early aughts. And I'm sure they're very expensive homes, but they're compost behind the brick facades. And there is no way to fix that easily. How about if we just get water management details as a start? Wouldn't that be great?
That'd be a good place to start.
I was talking to Carol of course it would be tough to be married to me. So I was talking to Carol yesterday morning about this very subject, right? And I said, Carol, if we ever have to move for whatever reason, and we're not looking to buy a house or move, but I was like, there is so much garbage out there in the housing market, and you really can't tell. And if you knew you had one of these houses, I'm sure there's a lot of people who would not tell a soul, their agent or any potential buyers, that they knew that there was compost behind their walls. And you could buy one of these pieces of junk and have to spend tens or $100,000 to fix it. Yeah. I told her if we have to, go home shopping, she's going to go ahead with the agent, and I'm going to lag behind, and I'm going to pull back pieces of vinyl siding so I can peek behind there to see what's going on.
Yeah, and the inspectors are pretty limited in what they're allowed to do, right? They're not allowed to move things. No. They can't lift up some insulation in the attic to see what it looks like underneath, or look behind the vinyl siding. So inspections they're worthwhile, and they certainly reveal some things. But when it comes to a lot of these structural issues and whatnot, they're also kind of lacking.
Yeah.
Hey there, fine home builders, longtime listener, first-time caller. My wife and I recently purchased a foreclosed property that was being used as a grow house outside Seattle. We have the most awesome listeners, I swear. It's not in bad shape, but very dated. It was built in the early 80s, kind of remodeled in the 90s, and it screams, "Somebody help me!" I'm taking on the entire renovation myself, with the exception of electrical and plumbing, because I'm just not there yet. One issue I am unsure how to tackle is the buckled floor in the garage. The garage door on the left does not sit flush against the concrete and can't be replaced until the slab is fixed. While I would love a brand new slab, it's just not in the budget for this one, but the garage doors are a must to keep rodents, weather, and whatever else out, not to mention the current ones are a little rough around the edges. My plan is to saw cut the buckled sections out, deal with any roots or issues below the slab, add new gravel, pack it down, and lay down some rebar before I call the local concrete company to fill the area with fresh concrete. I would also add a few expansion joints for good measure and paint it once it's all done so it's not a total eyesore. The goal is to get me down the road for 5 to 10 years and then deal with a new slab. Heck, I'll even take 3 to 5. Does this seem like a reasonable solution, or should I get back to the drawing board? Dave from Seattle, Washington. You go first, Matt.
Ooh. It doesn't look that much different from my garage, actually. So, man. Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, how much more is it going to cost to replace the entire thing versus, if you're going to have a concrete truck come out, you're going to have short load fees for the amount that he's talking about anyway. So it's
what Matt is talking about, Davey, is that you pay more per yard when you get small amounts of concrete. You pay less when you get a bigger order.
Yeah. So, if you're going to do it, I don't see why you wouldn't just replace the entire thing, at once. That way you can get a vapor barrier under that entire thing and get with the rebar and everything just continuous. And it's just going to make your life so much easier to deal with it all at once rather than a little bit now and then the rest of it later.
You're nodding your head, Brian.
Yeah, that's when I saw the section that he was planning to remove and pour new concrete. And I thought it's the same thing as Matt. It seems like so much of the garage that I found it, it was hard for me to believe that, he couldn't come up with the change to do the rest of it.
It's probably going to cost the same either way.
Yeah. So I thought to myself, if it really is a financial issue, is there even less he could do as a temporary fix? Could he just fix underneath the door to let it sit flat? Do even less for now, if that's the, and save this money so that you can do the whole slab sooner.
Right.
What do you think, Jeff?
Yeah. I think it's kind of an all or nothing sort of an approach that, like Brian was saying, it's just get the door to close.
Davey, we never all agree on something on this show. So you got to take all the concrete out, or as Brian suggests, do something less. I thought make new carriage style doors that, match the floor. And, you could do that for a couple $100 is my guess, right? And leave the floor alone until you can really do it and jackhammer it all out of there. It's going to come up pretty easy and just bite the bullet then.
Can you just scribe the current overhead door?
Yeah, I've seen that done.
Yeah. Probably, and it would be a fun project, actually.
Yeah.
Scribing.
As far as scribing stuff, that would be no different than, a molding to stone
exactly.
It'd be fun.
I think you should go out there and do this for him, man. Hey, FHB team, in Massachusetts, there's a push in some towns to electrify all heating sources and eliminate fossil fuels. As a home builder, natural gas seems to be the most efficient way to heat a house. Mini splits seem practical in some applications, mostly renovation, but to eliminate tankless gas water heaters and 96 ECM gas furnaces with electric heat pumps is foolish. If electric prices were in Massachusetts were cheap, I'd be more for electric, but that's not the case. With the nuclear energy disappearing and the sun not so bright in the winter months, we'll be using fossil fuels to run our power plants for many decades to come. Is any of this movement backed by hard science or data? What is the cost savings for the end user? What about upfront costs? Can you do a deep dive into this one? Feel free to edit for clarification and keep up the good work. P.S. In my own house, my radiant heat system is awesome, and the gas bill on my small HE Alpine boiler is cheap in comparison to my old townhouse that had electric heat pump furnace. Bob. I think Bob asked a good question. And we had a BS and beer on this recently, and it was a very interesting discussion. And Ross Trethewey, who is the son of the famous This Old House plumber, right?
Yep.
Had a very practical question. It's like, how do you get folks in Massachusetts to get away from their boilers and gas furnaces when the cost per BTU is like, if you compare it to electricity and with a COP of 1, which means electric resistance heat, it costs 5 cents, versus 20 cents for a kilowatt hour of electricity. And of course you can get COP heat pumps down to 3 probably, right, Brian?
You can get heat pumps, but I think as high with COP as high as 4.
We should tell folks what COP means first, right?
Yeah, it means coefficient of performance, and it essentially means that for every unit of energy that you put into it, you get, if it's a COP of 2, you get twice as much energy out of it. So,
and that's a comparison to resistance heat, right? It's you're paying for a kilowatt hour, but you're getting twice as much heating than you would from resistance heating, which is like the benchmark.
So he's not correct that his gas appliances are more efficient than electric appliances.
They're cheaper to run.
They're not. He is correct that they can be more cost effective. I mean, there's no more efficient, I don't think, way to make to heat a home, to cool a refrigerator or heat water than a heat pump in terms of efficiency. But that's not the same thing as cost effectiveness, right? That's not the same thing as efficiency when it comes to your money. So, and this is not just a Massachusetts thing. All over the coasts.
The whole country. The whole country.
There's a movement to start to remove gas and fossil fuels from new buildings, both residential and commercial. And it may not make economic sense for a while. The movement is about decarbonization. And I think the little that I know about it, it's about the future, right? It's about new buildings. No one's going to tell you have to take your gas appliances, combustion appliances out of an existing house. So it's about preparing for the future.
Some folks get really, really, really upset when you say you're going to take away their gas range.
Yeah, they get mad about that one.
And I think a lot of folks could argue that's a really dangerous appliance and bad for your health. An unvented gas range is pouring combustion byproducts in your house.
I think the idea is that, if we're burning fossil fuels on site, that can't be, and if those appliances are available to be, and utilities are there for them to be installed, then it can't be controlled. But when it's in the hands of the utilities, it can be. And the electrical grid is getting cleaner and cleaner. This in 2020, coal production is down 25%. Natural gas and electricity production is flat, and renewables are up 11%. And consequently, the grid is 11% cleaner. than it was. And that's the direction that things are headed. So to start having people put electric appliances in their houses now, it prepares us for a future with less carbon emissions. Also, the infrastructure is old, and natural gas mains are leaky. Up to 3% of natural gas delivered is lost to leaks.
Yeah.
So that's a problem too. So this is,
and why is that a problem?
I can't make
Brian,
an argument.
Why are leaks a problem? A lot of folks probably don't realize.
Right, because it's a methane gas that gets released into the atmosphere, which is actually it was actually the worst greenhouse gas, I believe. There might be worse, I don't know, but it's certainly worse than a lot of others.
It's way worse than CO2, which is the comparison that everyone is more familiar with.
Right.
So I can't make an argument for this being a smart economic idea. I don't know a ton about how that all works. I know that there's lots of investment in utility scale wind and solar and hydro, and that we are producing a lot more electricity that way. And so I believe this is about preparing for that future. And if municipalities are able to pass these ordinances that require this, then it might be a financial hit for people for a while. I don't know.
Matt, what do you think? Do you think?
I mean, I'm definitely for it, but
you are.
Yeah, but I wouldn't, like this guy, I don't know. I wouldn't want to take the boiler out of my house right now, but I will say that, as soon as that thing dies, I'm getting rid of my oil tank, and I'm not going to replace it with another oil-fired boiler. I actually just got an oil delivery yesterday, and I'm burning about a little less than a gallon a day, between July and now. And that'll probably go up a little bit through the winter. So
I love that you track that.
Yeah. And it's not like it's not like I use that much, but at the same time, my boiler is located in a really dumb spot. Like it's as far away from the taps as it could possibly be in my house. And it's, it's kind of loud compared to, having like a heat pump water heater, that I could use for my regular water, or for my,
domestic hot water.
For my domestic hot water. And, I do like my baseboard heaters in that they, heat the house up very quickly, but I don't have air conditioning, and I would love the opportunity to replace everything with mini split heat pumps and just get, sort of just have it all,
It's hard to look at the issue outside of the context of the whole home, because if you're talking about like a leaky old home, uninsulated home, or even a poorly built new home, and you're trying to heat and cool that place, and you do need to do it as cost effectively as possible. But if you're building a new home and you throw your money into the envelope, and you're conserving energy first, you're not only are you going to be putting in much smaller and more affordable mechanical systems, but at that rate you're going to be using such little electricity as it is, that it's not going to be a problem. It's not going to be a concern.
Yeah. I mean, if you bring that load down, then the extra cost of the electricity is like, you're still going to be paying less.
It's very, you don't realize at the time, but you learn stuff in college, and they were wrong. I remember in my environmental studies classes hearing about how gas was going to be our bridge to a more renewable energy picture, right? And it, because gas, electricity is cheap to make. Gas, electricity plants are cheap to build, and gas has a lot less harmful emissions when you burn it compared to oil and coal, right? But when I learned that the big problem was gas was the distribution losses and how potent a greenhouse gas it is, it really harshed my mellow. It made me really sad. It's because there's a lot to like about gas appliances. They're cheap. They perform very well. They're easy to fix. They don't need a lot of maintenance because the combustion is pretty clean. It's just a sad thing, Bob, and I agree that gas isn't what they promised us.
But it's interesting that letter also is coming from Massachusetts, because they had, was it a year or two ago, they had like blocks of some area, I think around Alston or something like that, blew up.
Yeah.
And I mean, like it's dangerous, and people died in that. So, I mean, I don't know. That kind of soured me on the entire idea, but.
And the infrastructure is old, as Brian said, right? It's like, that makes it riskier.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff, what do you think?
People love their induction cooktops, by the way. I've never tried one. I like to cook on gas, but.
So here's the thing.
But I'd be interested to try one.
Sam Maver, our managing editor, right? Her husband is a home chef. He hates the induction.
What doesn't he like about it?
He doesn't think it's as responsive as gas. And I haven't heard anyone else say that, but there you go. There's somebody. Jeff, what do you think about this very complicated issue?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that he mentioned in his letter was comparing it to his old townhouse heat pump, which, I mean, the 70s and 80s, the heat pumps were horrible in terms of efficiency. I mean,
and the comfort, right? They blew cold air.
They wouldn't work below like 45 degrees, and then it went to electric resistance. So,
and it's a good point.
Very good.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Jeff, because those high efficiency levels do come down somewhat in colder temperatures. They're dependent, right? Like a heat pump doesn't always have the stated COP. It depends on certain conditions and temperatures. But they, I think it's still true that in general, you can buy a much more efficient heat pump than any other type of system right now.
Yeah, especially the older first generation heat pumps that were horrible.
Yeah.
I think it's important to remember too that any heating and cooling system begins with like proper system design. So if you have a badly designed system, there's no equipment that's going to work well, right? And if you're putting the ductwork in an unconditioned space, that's a killer too. So this is it's a very complex issue, obviously, and it's a great question. There are definitely market forces that are going to prevent wide adoption of electric heating and cooling or electric heating in many places, I think, for a long time, because gas is so much cheaper and we have a lot of it in this country.
Yeah.
I feel
and like affordability affordability has to be a consideration in all this, right? Housing is already expensive enough. So it's like, we do need to move to a low carbon future, but we also have to consider that people have to be able to live.
They can't freeze to death, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And poor folk are already, struggling. And if you made their energy bills more expensive, that's rough.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially in an area like Massachusetts, where the housing stock is probably much older than a lot of the country. And it's just going to cost so much more for them to heat an old, leaky, uninsulated probably house than, Jake has got with any of his new builds.
I like to think that there's a lot smarter people than us working on this issue. I hope that's the case.
Me too, but I don't think there are. I mean, not that we're smart, but I worry. So, Brian, you want to talk about our special podcast coming up in the next year? Would you mind filling listeners in? We've had a couple folk write in. Our friend Jonathan, who's he's actually visited the Taunton campus in pre-COVID times and has written to us a number of times. He's a sweet guy. He wants to interview me for whatever reason. So, and we had another listener who wants to interview Mike Gerton or Mike Carroll, or is Carroll? John Carroll, excuse me. Both very long time Fine Home Building contributors and both interesting guys. So we've gotten some response, but you want to fill folks in?
Yeah, so we were trying to come up with some fun ideas to celebrate Fine Home Building's 40th anniversary. And one of the things that we decided we would do is invite some of the podcast listeners. The podcast has just, become such an important part of, what Fine Home Building does. And it's just such an excellent way to, thanks to Patrick, particularly an excellent way
thanks to our listeners is really what it's thanks to.
Yeah, you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Anyway, it's been such an important part of how we are sharing this building information. And so we thought we would invite some of our listeners to come on for an episode, to be on the podcast, and that we would connect them with one of our authors or contributors or editors, whoever they want really, to interview. So if you have someone who has written for Fine Homebuilding or been on the podcast or been in our videos that you think would be, you would like to talk to about some building topics, just shoot us an email and let us know who you'd like to speak with. And
we're not even asking what you would ask them, right?
No.
It's just like, no.
Just tell us who it is you'd like to speak with. If you want to tell us what you'd like to talk about, that's great. We might be able to pull in some other people who are great, would be great guests for that topic as well. But just let us know, and we're going to try to set that up and do a few of those episodes over the next year.
I'm going to make a plug for Fine Homebuilding Magazine and finehomebuilding.com. So we'll also be celebrating the 40th anniversary of the brand in those two places. And we have classic feature articles from early issues of Fine Homebuilding planned for next year, right, Brian?
Yeah, we're gonna put one article from the first year of Fine Homebuilding in the corresponding issues of this coming year, 2021, and we're just going to publish them
exactly as they appeared, right?
Exactly as they appeared. We're not going to let Matt look at them. Matt will find all the code violations and all the wrong fasteners. So we're not letting Matt put his eyes on them. We're just going to publish them as they were, just as a fun way to sort of show, where we, our beginnings. We can have I'm sure we will have some interesting discussions about whether methods are still relevant or not, and what has changed over the years. So it's one of many things we're doing. We're going to have a video tip contest happening online, and a few other fun things.
It's funny. One of our art directors, Melinda, was talking to our more senior art director, Rodney, about these old articles. And she said to him, there's something weird going on with the kerning with these old articles. I don't understand. And it's kind of an inside joke for those of us in the magazine business, because these magazine pages were typeset by hand. Somebody physically put words on a press and spaced them with their hand and eye. And you wouldn't know that unless you'd been in the magazine business for I don't know how many decades, right? 40 years, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the technology has gone, there are so many things that, if you grew up in digital printing, you have no idea, what it used to be like in the old days. I mean, either hot type or paste up, there's so many things that have come and gone that, if you've only been in publishing for the last 10 or maybe even 20 years, you've never even seen.
That stuff quickly becomes outdated, right, in the industry, because you got to make stuff as quickly as possible.
Yep.
Well, it was interesting to reflect on this a little bit. I was getting ready to write a letter for the next issue about the anniversary and what we're doing, and it was sort of interesting to reflect on both publishing and building, and how I was kind of thinking that things were kind of, for the first half of our history, things were a little more stable, and for the second half of our history, building and publishing have evolved so rapidly, and there's been a lot to keep up with in both of these businesses that we're in.
Yeah.
Well, that was a great show, guys. Thank you. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have today. Thanks to Matt, Brian, and Jeff for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your questions to FHB Podcast at taunton.com, and please comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Folks, please put a review up on the Apple podcast store. I love reading that stuff, and it really helps boost the profile of the podcast, and I'm going to ask your help again, as I do every so often. So if you do that, I'd be grateful. Thanks again for listening, everybody. Stay safe and happy building.